My homeless alien story. I decided to submit this story to several YouTubers and hope at least one would read it. To be honest, it's not as scary as some of the other stories they tell, but I thought I'd submit it anyways. I'm not sure where or how to start the story. It doesn't have anything to do with the story, but I am female. At the time of the story, I was homeless and living out of a travel trailer. I'm originally from Massachusetts, but traveled all over the New England area while living in this trailer. I don't know if this has anything to do with what happened, but during the time the story took place, I was staying close to what is known as Bridgewater Triangle. I'm not going into detail what Bridgewater Triangle is. If you Google it, you'll find all you need to know. Anyways, this was back in 2009. I had lost my job in January of that year, and after several months, I knew getting another would be tough. Now, I'm sort of a tomboy and love camping, hiking, and fishing. As I mentioned before, I owned a small travel trailer, and I pulled it around with my trusty Jeep Wrangler. I decided to conserve what money I had left and move into my travel trailer. I wasn't paying $1,200 a month for a place when I wasn't sure when I'd get a job again. Luckily, I was already kind of strict with money, so I had a decent amount saved. If I kept that place, I might have drained my bank account and ended up in the trailer anyways, but with nothing. This was back during the recession after all. Now back to the story. I was stealth camping, and though the area I was in was heavily wooded, there were small populated pockets I had to worry about. If I wasn't careful, I could easily be found out. A lot of the local cops were nice, but when it came to the state police, you have a 50-50 chance of running into a dickhead, at least in my experience. I was parked in a small clearing off a small dirt trail that, from what I could tell, was barely used. I mean, it was used, but just enough to keep the grass from growing. To be honest, I don't know how I got both my Jeep and trailer down it. Anyways, one afternoon, after locking up both the Jeep and the travel trailer, I took my mountain bike and went for a supply run.
I wasn't getting a lot, just enough to get me through the night. At about halfway down there, I got this uneasy feeling like I was being watched. So being the paranoid person that I was, I decided I should head back to my trailer and leave. For all I knew, it could have been nothing, but I didn't want to chance it. I got back, threw my bike in the trailer, and jumped in my Jeep. I somehow managed to get my Jeep and trailer turned around and made my way to the main road I had pulled off from. If you're wondering, yes, I know the area well, and going down there all my life. I pulled left and decided to go to a campground I favored, stopping at a little mom-and-pop country-style store I was familiar with for supplies. I got to the campground several minutes later, checked in, and went to my site. I didn't pay for lodging of any sort very often, so I didn't mind paying the $15 fee for the one night. Once I got to my campsite and set up, I decided to head to the nearby lake for a swim. Let me explain the area a little bit. It's important later. This particular camping section of the state park I was staying in is sort of oval-shaped, with the entrance to the east, the lake to the south, and several bathhouses, one being on the north side, not too far from my campsite, one on the west side, and one almost at the entrance. If you're in the campsite directly west of the north bathhouse, you can see a decent-sized clearing just beyond a small tree line. If you look left, you can see my campsite. There is also a path that cuts the two campsites in half, acting in sort of a border between the two. The clearing I mentioned is big enough that people in both campsites could see a bit of it. The path acts as a border between the two campsites, runs the road straight into that clearing and a little beyond. I'd also like to mention that the north bathhouse is the halfway mark through this camping section, and along with a road running parallel to it. There's a road that runs from it down to the lake. I used that road to get from my campsite to the lake. Anyways, it was about 8 in the evening when I decided to head back to my campsite and grab something to eat. I made a fire in the fireplace that came with the site and stood next to it to dry off a little before getting the food. A few minutes later, I went into my camper and got 4 hot dogs, buns, and ketchup. I put the hot dogs on sticks and stuck them in the ground, angled over the fire. As they cooked, I went back into the trailer and decided to change into my jammies, a pair of swim shorts, and a green t-shirt. I also grabbed a camping chair. For whatever reason, my campsite didn't come with a picnic table like the others, so I brought a small personal table to put my food on. By the time I set up, the hot dogs were done. I sat there and ate. By the way, it's true what they say. Everything does taste better when you're camping. Halfway through eating, I got the eerie feeling that I was being watched. I totally forgot about it. I brushed it off as either my imagination, curious animals, or other campers. Typical cliche, I know. I should have known better. Shortly after 9, when the few other campers in the area seemed to be settling into their campsites, I decided to put my chair back into the camper and take a small walk down the path I mentioned earlier, the one leading to the field. I brought a joint with me and lit it well, stepping onto the path. I made it to the middle of the field, staying on the path, and enjoyed my joints. Now, it's important to mention that the path continues up to another path that runs perpendicular to it. You can go either left or right onto this path and go deeper into the woods. At this point, given the time, you can assume it's dark. Personally, I find it relaxing, especially given my setting. The only light I have now comes from the moon and the camping area I just came from. I don't know how long I was standing there, maybe 5 minutes, when I get the feeling that I'm being watched again, and this time, it bugs the shit out of me. I look to where the path ends and meets the cross trail. At first, I don't notice it, but I eventually notice a figure at the end of the trail. Standing off to the left of the cross trail, I can only see the left half of their body. It's as if they're trying to hide. Not that they're doing a good job. The figure, due to the low light, looks like a very tall human, maybe 6.5 feet tall and thin. A little too thin. Almost anorexic, but not quite there. I decided I wasn't gonna deal with the creep, so I nonchalantly walked back to my camp while finishing my joints. I'm freaking out on the inside, but I don't want to provoke this jackass into attacking me. As I get to my trailer, I look back and can no longer see this person. As I'm sitting here typing this, I'm starting to think about how strongly cliche the story is, but it's all true. I finish my joint and decide to have a cigarette before actually going into the trailer. Halfway through the cig, I just realize that the figure is still there, but closer. Through the thin tree line, I see it. I then realize that there are actually several now, maybe 6 or 7 scattered just beyond the trees. I look around me and see maybe a dozen more scattered around my site, just staring at me. All stand just outside the lighting of both the camp and moonlight, all seemingly just dark figures. As high as I was, I decided not to freak out. I made sure my trailer was secure and got into my Jeep. I then drove out of the small camping area and headed to the main office. I knew the main office was closed, so I parked in the parking lot and slept there. I went straight to my trailer without looking around, went to my bed, laid down, and fell asleep. I woke up at about 5, made coffee, and waited for the main office to open. When it did, I checked out immediately. As I was just about to get into my Jeep, I looked into the woods just beyond my trailer, and there it was. A few feet into the forest, there was what you would expect a typical gray to look like. I didn't know how to react, so pretending I didn't see anything, I just got into my Jeep and drove off. I drove just north of Boston to a friend's house and stayed with them for about a week.
I didn't tell them or anyone else what happened. I don't care if you do or don't believe me. I know what I saw. I know they were there. I haven't seen them since. At least not that I can remember. I've been camping since, just not at this particular campground. I've also since gotten a job working at a zoo and gotten a new place. My message to you all, don't be ignorant to the fact that there are things out there that you can't explain. We have a healthy amount of skepticism, yes, but don't let it make you ignorant or blind your ability to be open-minded. I always believed in the existence of extraterrestrials and other things that we would consider paranormal, or at least are possibilities, but I never thought I'd be a witness. Ghost Friend Story. I'm a 22-year-old male. I'm a medium and I can see and speak to ghosts. But anywho, I first met Jessica when I was a 19-year-old senior at high school, in a small city about 30 minutes north of Seattle. It all began when my two best friends, we'll call them JP and JH, invited me to go play airsoft in the woods next to our apartments. Backstory: the woods were a park before it fell into disuse around the late 90s and early 2000s. I'm laying prone in a bush, waiting hidden, to ambush my friends when I hear this girl say hi right behind me, which almost made me shit myself. So I look back to see a white girl in her late teens, short-length blonde pixie haircut, which she did herself, hence why it was so choppy and not even. She was dressed like an early 80s punk. From the start we hit it off. It was cool that I found another punk like me. So we talked for about half an hour, and then I get a text from JH, saying they were waiting for me by the entrance of the woods, saying they wanted to go swimming, so I said goodbye. Then the next day, a Sunday, I went back to the woods to hang out with her, so we went walking around the neighborhood on the other side of the old park, and she explained that she goes to the same high school as me. Then came Monday, so I asked my fourth period teacher, "Have you seen my friend Jessica today?" Since she said she knew him, so he gave me a confused, perplexed look and asked me to describe her, so I did. And he goes on to explain that he was a junior at the school back in 1984 and proceeds to pull a yearbook off the bookshelf next to his desk, one of the year of 1984, and flips to a page and points to a picture of a girl and asked if this was the girl. So I look, and to my confused horror, it was Jessica, my best friend. So I say yes, but it can't be. It must be your daughter or something like that. My teacher said, that's impossible, because Jessica died of a heroin OD in the winter of '84 at the age of 17. And he went on to explain we had a couple classes with her, and that she was a punk and nice, but did come off a little crass. I since moved to the Midwest, and Jessica attached herself to me, and is with me all day every day, and is basically my ghost best friend. So yeah, it may not be as scary as the other ghost or demon stories, but believe it or not, that's my story. I hope you use it in a video. Ghosts. I've been putting off telling these stories for over a year, for fear of them being stupid. Both of these stories happened when I was a child at my childhood home. I still live on the same property, as I have since 2 years old, but in a different house now. I didn't feel any fear during either story, and didn't even realize anything was strange about the first until years later. My brothers always told me our land was haunted, and that at night you could hear ghosts on the roof of the house stomping around. But I always thought they were only trying to scare me, but I guess I was wrong. Also, in case it matters, I am female. These stories are really short, because I don't remember a lot of details. Also, I'm not a very good storyteller or writer. Also, please email me if you decide to read them online so I can be sure not to miss them. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy. Story 1. Ghosts in the Woods. One of my older brothers and I were playing in the woods behind our house. He decided to go back to the house and leave me alone. I was playing around by myself when I felt something behind me. I turned around and saw a boy and a girl behind me smiling. They were wearing old-style clothes, and both had brown hair and blue eyes. I played with them for a little while, and then heard my brother calling, telling me to come into the house. I turned around and asked them to come play with me inside the house. They told me they couldn't, because they were waiting for their mom, and looked really sad. I asked them how long they were going to be waiting for. They said, "A very long time." Then I turned my head because my brother called again, and when I looked back, they were gone. Story 2. Crying Mom. I awoke one night to crying in the living room next to my bedroom. I got up, walking into the living room where I found my mother crying. She was wearing a long white nightgown and looked very, very upset. I asked her what was wrong, and she told me her husband died. I told her Dad wasn't dead, and she was confessing me. She told me he was dead because he killed himself. I yelled at her, telling her to stop telling lies. She told me he hung himself and then got up and started walking away. I followed her the best I could, but she was moving really fast. When I got past the hallway into the kitchen, I saw her at her bedroom door, and then she walked right through the closed door. I blinked, not believing my eyes, and ran to her bedroom and opened the door. That's when I saw my mom and dad, both asleep in their beds. I asked her the next morning, and she swears it was not her, and was also wearing a blue nightgown instead of white. But what she told me next sent chills up my spine. She told me that her great-great-grandmother had a husband. He had lost his job due to mental illness and could not support his family. So one day, in a depressed state, as he went into the barn and hung himself and his daughter found him. She also told me that her great-great-grandmother and her looked a lot alike. And when I thought about it more, I realized that her white nightgown looked like it was from older times and not modern.